Sheep this way and goats the other. Sheep get to go to heaven, goats get to go to, the other place. In our gospel reading from Matthew this morning, Jesus is talking about the end time when the sheep are going to be separated from the goats. It wasn't really like a Palestinian farmer at night where they did, it turns out, separate the sheep from the goats. Apparently they didn't get on too well during the night, so the sheep would go in one pen and the goats would go in the other. Jesus has got kind of a bigger picture in mind than that, the time when the Son of Man is going to sit in judgment. Sounds all a bit scary. And it turns out that the sheep, who are the good ones, poor goats really, I don't know why he had it in for goats, but anyway, the sheep are the good ones. And they, it turns out, are the ones who are going to have fed Jesus, welcomed him, clothed him, and visited him. Those are the ones who are going to be rewarded. But the sheep protest and say, okay, but we didn't actually do any of these things to you. How are we doing those things? We didn't know you. And the goats, who really do have a reason to protest, say, well, we didn't know you either. We didn't know that beggar that we passed in the street was you, or the stranger that we couldn't be bothered talking to at coffee hour at church was you. If we'd realised it was you, Jesus, well, if we'd realised it was you, of course, we would have stopped and talked and helped out and, wanted to be seen to be doing the right thing. Well, it wasn't literally me, Jesus says, but every time that you reached out, every time you engaged with someone in need, it was as if you were talking to me, helping me. And every time you didn't do that, it was as if you were ignoring me. Now, I would think that both the sheep and the goats, and we along with them, might well protest and say, hang on a minute, it's impossible to help every person in need and to talk to every stranger we meet. And we can't literally visit everyone in prison. That would be impossible. If we gave money to everyone who asks us on the street, we'd have nothing left for our families and our children. So surely we're being set up for failure here. How can we possibly win at this one? Well, let me tell you a story that might help us figure it out. Once upon a time, there was a monastery, and it had been a great order, but it had lost now all its branch houses, and it had become decimated to the extent that there were only 5 monks left in the monastery. They were left in a decaying mother house. There was the abbot and 4 other monks, and they were all over 70 in age. Clearly, it was a dying order. But in the deep woods surrounding the monastery, there was a hermitage where a hermit lived. And as the abbot agonised over the imminent death of his order, it occurred to him to visit the hermitage and to ask if by some possible chance the hermit could offer some advice that might save the monastery. After all, he was a very holy man. He'd lived in prayer alone all his life. He must know something. The hermit welcomed the abbot to his hut. But when the abbot explained the purpose of his visit, the hermit could only commiserate with him. I know how it is. I hear the spirit has gone out of the people. It's the same everywhere. So the old abbot and the hermit commiserated together. And the time came when the abbot thought he'd better leave, and they embraced each other. And he said, it's been wonderful to talk with you, but I've still failed in my purpose for coming here. Is there nothing you can tell me? No piece of advice you can give me that would help me save my dying order? No, I'm sorry, the hermit responded. I have no advice to give you. The only thing I can tell you is that the Messiah is one of you. When the abbot returned to the monastery, his fellow monks gathered around him and said, well, what did he say? He couldn't help. We just commiserated together. And he said one cryptic thing as I left. He said that the Messiah is one of us. But I don't know what he could possibly have meant. In the days and the weeks and the months that followed, the old monks pondered these words and wondered whether they could mean anything. The Messiah is one of us. Could the hermit have meant he was one of us monks here at the monastery? And if that is the case, well, which one? Do you suppose he meant the abbot? Yes, if he meant anyone, he probably meant the abbot. He has been our leader for more than a generation. On the other hand, he might have meant Brother Thomas. Certainly Brother Thomas is a holy man. Everyone knows that Thomas is a man of light. Certainly he could not have meant Brother Elred. Elred gets very crotchety at times. But come to think of it, even though he is a thorn in people's sides, when you look back on it, Elred is virtually always right. Often very right. Maybe the hermit did mean Brother Elred. But surely not Brother Philip. Philip is so passive, he's a real nobody. Nobody notices him. But then, almost mysteriously, he has a gift for somehow always being there when you need him. He just magically appears by your side. Maybe Philip is the Messiah. And of course, the hermit couldn't mean me. He couldn't possibly have meant me. I'm just an ordinary person. Yet supposing he did. Suppose God is calling me to something greater. But I couldn't do that, could I? And as they contemplated in this manner, the old monks began to treat each other with extraordinary respect on the off chance that one of them might just be the Messiah. And on the off chance that each monk himself might be the Messiah, they began to treat themselves with extraordinary respect. Now, because the forest in which it was situated was beautiful, it so happened that people still occasionally came to visit the monastery, to picnic on its tiny lawn and to wander along its paths, and even now and then to go into the old chapel to meditate. And as they did so, without even being conscious of it, they sensed the aura of extraordinary respect that now began to surround the 5 old monks and seemed to radiate out from them and permeate the atmosphere of the place. There was something strangely attractive and compelling about it. Hardly knowing why, they began to come back to the monastery more frequently to picnic, to play, and to pray. And they began to bring their friends, and their friends brought friends. And then it happened that some of the younger people who came to visit the monastery started to talk more and more with the old monks. And after a while, one of them asked if he could join them, and then another, and then another. And so within a few years, the monastery had once again become a thriving order. And thanks to the hermit's gift, a vibrant centre of light and spirituality in the realm. Jesus, as the Son of Man, sits in judgment on those sheep and those goats. Not so we will all rush out and give away all we have and exhaust ourselves trying to meet the standard of the gospel story. Jesus tells us about the sheep and the goats so that we will think about what it might be like to see God or Christ in every person that we meet. One writer, who's aptly named Jennifer Lord, says the kingdom of God is not a location or a state of emotion or even a social service activity. The kingdom of God is not a location or a state of emotion or even a social service activity. The kingdom of God is us as we see Christ in each other. The kingdom of God or the way of God or the community of God is not ordered and beautiful like our liturgy. It's messy and random and as varied and as wonderful as each one of us, and as varied and as wonderful as each person who walks past our doors and never dreams of stepping inside. We step into God's community when we look at each other as if for the first time, with openness and interest, with genuine interest, to know and to discover who we each might be, without preconceived ideas and judgments. In the pastoral care training that some of us have been doing with Alana, we've been learning about our basic emotional needs for connection and care, and what a difference it makes when we really listen to each other and attend to each other, even if it's just for a moment. Without that kind of connection, we literally wither away and die. And in the kingdom of God and in our church communities, like in our families, we don't get to pick and choose who worships alongside of us. And we don't get to exclude anyone, as long as they are willing to treat others with respect and courtesy. We don't get to exclude anyone. We are stuck with each other. And sometimes we have to work really hard at being community together, and other times it just comes naturally. But imagine what might happen if we really worked at the spiritual discipline of seeing Jesus, the Messiah, the Christ, in each other. If we believed in each other enough, and if we believed in ourselves enough, that we would see Christ in each other, not just in our beautiful music and in the Eucharist, but in each other with all our annoying habits and ways of being. And then the people who drop by to picnic in our grounds, the people who drop by for events or for weddings or who drop into our services, they might wonder at what they find. They will not find perfect people. They will not find all of society's problems solved. They will not find our theologies exactly the same. They will not find that we all voted for the same political party. They will not find the sheep sorted from the goats. But they might just find a community full of passion for life and passion for God, whom we find in our midst and in each other and in the messiness of life. And they will find that because we know to look for Christ in each other.